everyone! I'd like to welcome MJ Rose, author of the new book, The Witch of Painted Sorrows, a Gothic tale evoking the mystery and romance of the Belle Époque era in France. Thank you so much for joining us today, MJ. It's great to have you here.
And it's great to be here. Thank you.
So this book has garnered rave reviews from Publishers Weekly, Associated Press, Kirkus, Booklist, Romantic Times, Suspense Magazine, USA Today, and also a starred review in Library Journal. It was on the Indie Next list. It ranks number 4 on the list of March library reads and was number 1 on the Huffington Post list of most anticipated books of 2015. And it will also be a featured review in People magazine next month. So congrats, that is amazing. And before we begin, MJ, I wanted to thank the following indie bookstores and have you read off the list for their excellent reviews of her book.
Yes, I've been really lucky that independent bookstores have really been supporting my last 6 books. Actually, this is the 7th book that they've picked for their list, and
Amazing.
I couldn't thank them more. So the bookstores I'd like to thank are Books and Booze in Colchester, Connecticut, King's English Bookstore in Salt Lake City, Utah, Letterpress Books in Portland, Maine, Bookworks in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Majors and Quinn in Minneapolis, West Wind's Bookshop in Duxbury, Massachusetts, Misty Valley Books in Chester, Vermont, McLean and Eakin Booksellers in Michigan, Bookbin in Idaho, Acorn Books in Dover, Delaware, Classic Bookshop in Palm Beach, Florida, the Hickory Stick Bookshop in Washington Depot, Connecticut, where I'll be in May, the Book Exchange in Marietta, Georgia, Book Passage in Corte Madera, California, Odyssey Bookshop in South Hadley, Massachusetts, Bear Pond Books in Montpelier, Vermont, and the Mysterious Bookshop in New York City, where I will be next Wednesday night. For anybody who's in New York at 6:30, please come join me, and Nancy Billieux will be talking about our new books.
Excellent.
With wine and cheese.
Even better. Amazing. So before we start the questions, I wanted to do a little kickoff question. Can you just tell us a little bit more about The Witch of Painted Sorrows?
Sure. So The Witch of Painted Sorrows is about Sandrine Salome, who's a New York socialite in 1894, who runs away from home and her husband and goes to Paris to live with her grandmother, and gets there and finds that her grandmother's house is sort of inhabited by a 16th century ghost of a courtesan witch who is her ancestor. And
Wow.
La Lune, that's the name of the courtesan from the 16th century, La Lune has been waiting and trying to possess her descendants. She, by accident, murdered her lover in the 16th century and became a witch to try to bring him back to life. And when that didn't work, she's been trying to inhabit one of her descendants so that she can feel love again. But it has a lot to do with the art world in Paris during the Belle Époque, when Matisse and Picasso and Moreau and so many amazing, Rodin was a sculptor, so many amazing people were there in Paris at the time. And there was a huge underground occult movement at the same time, with black masses and witches and all kinds of creepy, wonderful Gothic things going on.
It's the perfect time to portray. I love it. Now, Bren has a question. She wants to know how much research went into writing this book, and are any of the places that you write about in the book still around if you were to visit Paris?
Yes, a ton of research went into writing this book. I've been writing about France for about 6 years. My great-grandmother was born in France in 1880 and actually was a witch, and this book was sort of inspired by her. But I've been going back to France every year, kind of tracing my roots and getting to know the city better and better. So there's a lot of that research. And then there was about 3 months of really hardcore research about the occult movement in Paris at the time. I'm a painting major and an art history major, so I had to take a little bit of a refresher course of what the art world was like in Paris in 1894, but I knew a lot of that. In terms of what's there, so much is still there. The school that Sandrine goes to, the art school that she goes to, École des Beaux-Arts, is still there. The paint store, Sennelier, that she goes to is still there. Every restaurant that she goes to in the book is still there. The house that she lives in is sort of still there. The streets are certainly there. I've kind of taken two houses and put them together. So if you walk down the block, the rest of the block looks the same, but you wouldn't be able to find her exact house. Basically, I don't think that the only thing that's not still there is easier. The nightclubs, the two nightclubs that she goes to, one is called Hell. There was a whole group of nightclubs in Paris during the Belle Époque that were all decorated like places from the world. There was one called Hell, one called Heaven. There was one that was based on a jail. And the waiters and maitre d's all dressed in themes. So if you went to the prison one, you were waited on by prisoners with balls and chains around their ankles. So those nightclubs aren't still there, but they were there. And on my Pinterest board, I have a Pinterest board for the book, I have pictures of all the nightclubs and a lot of the other things. Certainly the Eiffel Tower might still be there, I think. The opera is still there. A big scene takes place in the opera. So basically, yeah, everything in the book. There's almost nothing that's made up in the book in terms of place.
That's amazing. I love that time period, and I know it's between the two wars, and a lot of people, it was a happy time for a lot of people, but I think with the lower classes and maybe the artists, it was more, they had a pessimistic outlook on some things. Does the book reflect that at all?
Not exactly. It reflects a different issue that was going on at the time. One of the themes of the book is how difficult it still is, very often, for women to be able to claim their creativity and their sexuality. And that even though we pay a lot of lip service to that now, and we did then, the fact is people are not comfortable with women being overtly sexual, and in a lot of cases, women being very creative. I mean, writers are one of the areas where we are, but in the art world, painters and sculptors it's still predominantly male. In the film industry, it's totally predominantly male in terms of the creators, from screenwriters to directors to camera people. That's just a totally male environment. So it's something that matters to me, but I'm not writing philosophical treatises, obviously, but it very much inspired the book, and the kind of line that I use is, sometimes in life, to get what you want, you have to tap into your inner witch. And I think that that's what Sandrine learns in this book, is that she wants to become an artist in a time where women couldn't go to the main art school. As much as Mary Cassatt was painting these amazing paintings and hanging out with Monet and Manet and Renoir, she wasn't allowed to go to the same art school they went to. That's outrageous in 1894. So that very much informs the book, but the book is not about the lower classes in Paris and the poverty level, and the artists that we're dealing with in the book are not, they're living in garrets, but it's not about that aspect of life in Paris.
So speaking of sexual liberation and finding your inner witch, without revealing too much, what part of The Witch of Painted Sorrows did you find was the most enjoyable to write?
I have a weird, I get asked that question a lot. I love rewriting. I love getting a first draft down fast and then spending an enormous amount of time rewriting my book and working on every sentence and going back and doing research and looking at pictures and making sure I describe something well. So I'd have to say that it's no different with this book than any other book, is that's the part of the book that I love. The first draft is very difficult because I sort of go into, I write every morning from 6:30 to 9 or 9:30, and I sort of go into a trance. And it's and to reach the characters and to put myself in the place that I'm writing about. I see every book like a movie playing out in the back of my head. And so I write with my eyes closed, and I just type what I'm seeing that day. And that part's hard.
Yeah. Do you work in silence? Do you listen to music? I always find it interesting to see what people...
To the same album for 13 of my 15 books, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
an album of Gregorian chants.
Oh,
Something
wow.
about the Gregorian chants puts me into that altered state so that I can focus on disappearing.
Hmm.
One book I wrote listening to jazz because it was a part of the book, but it was actually I lied. 12 out of 15. One book I wrote listening to Beethoven because he was a character in the book.
Nice. Now, Kristen wants to know, what are three elements that a novel needs in order to be successful?
Oh, let's see. It needs to have compelling characters. It
Hmm.
needs to have questions that it asks at the beginning that it answers by the end. And I think it needs to have a very strong fictive dream, which is something that John Gardner talked about, which is that when you start reading the book, even if it's about gremlins living inside of a coffee pot, you, the reader, have to really believe that there are gremlins living inside of a coffee pot, and you can picture them and hear them, and you let go of reality and you enter into a fictive dream, and the author doesn't take you out of that dream while you're in the world of the book. Tough question, by the way.
Yeah. Now, Heather wants to know, who was the hardest character for you to write? Was there any that stood out?
The hardest character for me to write is always the main character, the female main character.
Hmm.
I never think that I'm making them. I don't write very sympathetic characters, and my women tend to be too strong for when I start out, and too didactic. And
Hmm.
I always have to go back and fill in stuff about them so people might actually like them.
Hmm.
I always get reviews. There's always a certain number of reviews talking about how they really don't connect to my female character and they don't really like her, and it's something that I always fight. I guess I'm not very likable.
um, Jared has a question regarding the paranormal world. Do you find it difficult at any point to mold a normal and paranormal world together?
Um, no, actually, which probably says something really weird about me. I think because my great grandmother was a witch and my great grandfather believed in reincarnation and was
Hmm.
a Kabbalistic scholar, that I grew up hearing about a lot of weird stuff.
Right.
And I don't think that I ever heard it as anything strange or complicated or difficult. Like
Hmm.
my favorite movie when I was growing up, when I was a little girl, was the two movies were Portrait of Jenny
Hmm.
and The Uninvited, which both have to do with ghosts. So
Right.
I think, and Nancy Drew books were my favorite books. So I think that I melded those two things early, ghosts and mysteries.
Awesome. Um, Now, Billy has a question about what to do when you're starting out. He says, what sort of advice would you give someone who is just starting out in the writing business, publishing business?
Oh, do you have 75 hours? I think that the most important thing is the reason that you're writing. I think
Hmm.
that you have to be writing because you really love to write and that you really feel a burning desire to tell a story. I think that if you make the mistake of writing because you think that you're going to be successful or you're going to make money or you're going to become
Right.
famous, this is such a hard business and there's so much competition in it now.
Hmm.
There's so many books published every year between self-publishing and traditional publishing that the chances of succeeding are really no better than winning a lottery. So I think that if you're not doing this because it gives you incredible pleasure,
Yeah.
you're really not you there's no reason to do it. It's just too much hard work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess I would add, don't stop reading because I think that you learn from reading, and try to meet as many authors as you can and get to know them and form some friendships to get you through the hard parts.
Right. Now, speaking of just forming friendships with authors, what are some upcoming conferences that you're going to be going to? Can you tell us about anything that you're going to be attending?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to the Newburyport Literary Festival the last week in April, and I'm going to be on a panel with one of my closest friends, Allison Richmond, who some of you might have read The Lost Wife or her new book, Garden of Letters. and she's quite fabulous, and also Donna Monin and also Ann Easter Smith, who are fabulous writers, are going to be on that panel with me. And then I'm going to be, I think the next one is going to be Thriller Fest, which is one of the best conferences in the world as far as I'm concerned, and got everybody's there from Lee Child to Steve Barry to Sandra Brown to Heather Graham. So anybody who's in New York right after 4th of July should definitely come to New York to come to Thriller Fest.
Yeah. You guys heard it here first. You got to check it out. Now, Kristen wants to know, who influences your work? Do you have an author or a person in your life that you constantly draw inspiration from?
I go to the museum all the time. And I probably like 2 or 3 times a month. And I really draw most of my inspiration from art, not from books. I read all the time, and I love to read, but I disappear into books constantly. But it's art that really inspires me.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your...
Not that books aren't art. They are.
Right.
But the visual arts are what inspires me.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your background in art? I'm curious just to hear about kind of what you were interested in.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a painter. And starting when I was really little, my grandmother was a painter and my mother was a photographer. Wow. And so it was there was a lot of art, and like we had a closet in our house that was filled with ribbons and sequins and crayons and paint and paper, and scissors and glue, and coloring books, and it was just, you could go to the closet whenever you wanted, take anything out and do anything with it you wanted. Yeah. We never gave each other cards that we bought in the store. We made cards. We didn't wrap presents. We decorated boxes. So it was a very, very creative household. And I started taking art classes at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, of all places, when I was 6. Yeah. And when I was 15, I went to the Art Students League in New York. And I went to Syracuse University and majored in printmaking and painting and art history and got an art degree. But I wasn't very good. And I couldn't ever really create the thing that I could see in my head, and I was always very frustrated. And I had to earn a living, so I went into advertising out of college.
Now, at what point did you decide that you wanted to start writing? Was there like just a kind of...
Was always a crazy avid reader. I was one of those kids that walked down the street coming home from school with a book in front of my face. It's a miracle I never tripped and broke my face. It's like now what people look like with their phones up to their face, but I had a paperback book. So I loved reading, and my mother was sure that I was going to become a writer, and I was very rebellious. I still am. And so I was not going to become a writer, I think partially just to prove to her and my grandfather, who also thought I was going to be a writer, just to prove to them that I wasn't going to be a writer, I was going to be a painter. Yeah. So when I was in advertising, I did over 100 commercials, and I was the copywriter and the creative director. So what you do is you're telling stories with pictures and words and filming them. And I started kind of gradually going from writing 30-second stories into writing screenplays while I was in advertising. I got a bunch of screenplays optioned, and one particular screenplay got stolen by a very famous actress's production company. And I was warned by somebody and went to see the movie and sat in a movie theater watching my dialogue up on the screen and watching the story unfold, and then called my lawyer. And the famous actress turned the lawsuit over to the production company, which was one of the big ones, like Disney or Paramount or Columbia, one of those. Right. And my lawyer that it was going to cost me twice as much to sue them as they owed me because of how big they were. They have legal departments, and they're doing nothing but defending these suits. So I was like, okay, what do I do? And he said, well, if you really want to protect everything, you move out to L.A. If you really want to get into this business, move out to L.A. and write scripts in L.A. And if you're there and you're part of that world, this won't happen as much. Yeah. But I didn't want to move to L.A., and so another friend of mine said to me, well, if you're not going to move to L.A., then you should write novels instead of movie scripts, because they don't tend to steal books.
Yeah.
Which is true. It's like very easy to steal an idea, but it's very hard to steal an entire novel of, 400 pages.
Exactly.
So instead of starting a new screenplay, which I had an idea for, I decided to write it as a novel. And I knew nothing about writing novels, and it took me about 5 years to learn enough to actually finish that book. So I kind of say that I became a writer because of a stolen script.
That's a great story. Now, when it comes to, just getting your writing process down, are you a plotter? Are you seat of your pants writer? What's kind of the overall process?
For 3 months before I start writing, I make a very, very detailed scrapbook for my main character that's full of images and notes, and research goes in there, but also fun things, postcards and pictures torn out of magazines and very evocative images. And I do that for 3 months, and while I'm doing that, I call it procrastinating your way into writing a novel. Because during that time, I'm sort of working on the plot and taking notes. And at the end of that time, I make a list of the 20 main plot points in the book.
Yeah.
The points that I'm going to have to hit. I kind of see a novel as a journey. I know where I'm going to start and I know where I'm going to end, but I don't exactly know which way I'm going to get there. So I try to come up with 20 signposts along the way. Right. Very often I wind up throwing them out, but I do have them before I start the book. So I'm sort of a plotter.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Shelley has a question about social media. She wants to know, how important is social media when it comes to marketing your book?
This is another one of those 7-hour answers. Basically, it's important for the world of social media to be talking about your book. It is not necessarily at all good for you to be on social media yourself talking about your book.
Right.
So it's good to have a Facebook page. It's good to have a Twitter account. It's good to be... a good example, if you really want to see, is to follow Anne Rice and follow me on Facebook. And me, the one with the picture of me, not the picture of the dog. And you'll see the amount of time that we spend talking about ourselves versus engaging with our readers. Mm-hmm. Other than this week where I've been talking about the book, during the course of the year, if I post 1,000 times, probably, other than the week a book comes out, probably less than 10% of that, way less, probably 5% of that is ever me mentioning my book.
Yeah.
ITW, which is International Thriller Writers, did a huge survey this year for our authors to help them figure out social media. And we asked readers where they found the last book or where they go to find a book written by an author who's new to them. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, an author that you follow them on Facebook, you'd find out when they have a new book coming out. But we're talking about how do readers find books that are new to them. Mm-hmm. And 28% of people find books that are new to them in a store, whether that's a bookstore or Kmart or Walmart or the drugstore or Sam's Club. 28% of most people, there's an anomaly here when you come to romance novels, but with everything but romance novels, most people are finding books, 28% are finding them in a store.
Yeah.
Another, like 26%, are finding them through those e-blasts like BookTrib, where something goes on sale for 99 cents. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge way that people discover new authors. Mm-hmm. And then the way, way, way on the bottom, like 2% of people find out about an author who's new to them through that author's own social media efforts.
Right. Wow.
So it's important for other people to be talking about you, and that's hard to set up, but that is the best way to use social media.
Great advice.
And the big caveat about social media, when I talk about using social media, equally important is how not to overuse social media. Because you can actually, I call it social media suicide, where your persona on social media can actually turn people off. There are at least 5 authors I can think of, but sadly I won't name because it would be too gossipy, who I will never read anymore because of how they are on social media. Mm-hmm.
Takes away a bit of the mystique, maybe, too.
all of the mystique, and you find out that they're real narcissistic lunatics that can't even be nice for a minute.
Yeah. Wow. I have a question that just came up from Rosemary Sim, and she says, will we be seeing a hard, wicked side of Sandrine?
You mean in another book?
I think she wants to know if it's going to be coming up in another book, yeah.
No, the next book in the series is not about Sandrine. These books are standalones. But the thing that is going to tie them together is that La Lune, who is the 16th century courtesan witch, the book is going to be about, the other books are going to be about her descendants, all different descendants through all different periods of time. Mm-hmm. They're not all going to be about Sandrine.
Got it.
So the next book's not about Sandrine at all.
Ah, okay. So she knows now. So Mike wants to know, what aspect of the paranormal that you haven't explored, is there anything out there that intrigues you that you haven't yet written about?
Tons and tons and tons of things. I don't think I've really even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
I've written a little bit about seances. I really got into seances with a book called Seduction, which is based on Victor Hugo spending 2 years having seances trying to reach his dead daughter. That's true. He did that. And so I wrote a book that had him as a main character doing that and really got into seances, but I don't even think that I've explored them to the degree that I'm going to in future books. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, ghost seances, reincarnation is something I've been fascinated with for years.
Absolutely.
I guess the only thing is I don't like horror. I don't like, real hardcore horror, so I won't ever be going there.
Yeah. Emily has a question about the ending. She says it was a huge twist and set up a nice launching point for the next book. What can we expect next without too much revealing?
Well, so the next book is actually about Sandrine's daughter 24 years later. Mm-hmm. Sandrine is barely even a character in it. So it's funny, the twist at the end of the book, without giving anything away, is there is the twist. But I think what's going to happen to Sandrine next is really obvious. I can't explain that, obviously, without giving anything away, but I think the best way to say that is Sandrine becomes who she is at the end of the book. She is going to continue to be who she is at the end of this book. She's now found who she's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. That wasn't too cryptic for some people. It hopefully will not be too cryptic for other people.
Right. Kristen says, is it true that you only wear black? Do you just prefer it to all the other colors?
That's such a funny question. It's true that I only wear black 99% of the time. I do have a few white shirts that I wear with black, but I have some scarves that have colors in them. Mm-hmm. I have some scarves that have turquoise in them. I have a scarf that has coral in it, and I have some green scarves, too. I think I was a nun in another life and liked it a lot.
That's excellent. Billy wants to know, what are some hobbies that you do when you're not busy writing, if you have any time?
I love going to museums. I love art. I love to read. I like to cook. I like to walk a lot. I like to swim. And I like to travel. And I guess that's it. I watercolor. I still paint a little. I do very bad watercolors sometimes.
I'm sure they're lovely and full of colors and not just black, right?
They are. No black. No black at all in watercolors. I don't even use the black. Yeah, black paint in watercolors is untouched.
Yep, no good. Raven wants to know, what books are you reading right now, if any?
Oh, so I just finished a couple of books by some friends. I got early reading copies that I'll tell you all to go get. So I have a couple. One is Christopher Gortner, C.W. Gortner wrote a fabulous book called Mademoiselle Chanel that came out this week, as mine did, and it's actually dedicated to me. So it's beautiful. It's a wonderful book about Chanel, a fictionalized version of her life. So that's number one. Coming out in a little more than a week is Sarah Gruen's new book, At the Water's Edge, which I read in order to interview her for Book Movement. If you all don't know about Book Movement, bookmovement.com is a wonderful book club site, but we do interviews with a lot of people, and you can read these great interviews there. So I just read that. That was fabulous. Steve Berry has another one of his inimitable, brilliant thrillers coming out in also 10 days called The Patriot Threat, and that is a must-buy. And Allison Richmond's book, The Garden of Letters, which came out a couple months ago, which I just finished before all these, which is a beautiful book about a young girl in Italy who's part of the resistance in World War II. Excellent. So I'm sure I'm leaving out 95, and I'm going to get emails from tons of clients and friends saying, you could have mentioned my book too. But those are the 4 that really came to mind that I really love.
Emily wants to know about the main character's name, Sandrine Salome. Where did you come up with that? What's your process for kind of thinking up names?
Oh, coming up with names is probably one of the hardest things that I go through. First, I find a picture of the person, a painting or a drawing. It can't be a photograph. And it has to be a painting or a drawing of a person who doesn't have a name. We have a lot of parameters here, because if it were a painting or a drawing of a famous person, then it would affect me. But so I find the picture, and then I start looking, literally reading through the name book of every single name, and I find the first name first, and then I have to check what it means and make sure it doesn't mean some terrible thing. Except sometimes, like I was swimming the other day and came up with the name of the character in the next book without even a second's hesitation or a picture. So as much as I think there's a process, sometimes there isn't.
Yeah. Now, Jared has one question, and we actually ran out of time, so this is going to be the last one. What's your dream vacation? But more than that, I want to know, where are you going to go next to get the inspiration for what you're working on next? Do you always like to take trips?
I do like to take trips, and not sure yet where I'm going to go. That's not very provocative, but I really am not sure. I don't like talking. I guess this is a little provocative. I feel as if if I talk about what's going to happen next and let it get out into the ether, I'm going to dissipate it in a certain way, and it's not going to stay mysterious. I believe in magic, and I believe in mystery, and I think that what I write it incorporates magic and mystery so that people start realizing that there is magic and mystery in the world in little ways. And if I exaggerate it in big ways in my books, then you'll start to see it in little ways. And if I talk about it, I'm not the book. Like I'm somebody you may not like my fingernails, you may think my hair is the wrong color or my lipstick is the wrong color. And if you get to know me too well, then my books are going to be me, and they're not me. They're this thing outside of me. So I'm a little shy about talking about that stuff in that question.
She's not going to tell you where she's going, okay? Perfect.
You can't track me down.
She doesn't want anyone to know. Okay, well, it was great to have you here today, and thank you again to all the Indie Next List people that helped us.
Thank you for having me.
It was excellent. Take care. Thank you so much, MJ.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Enjoy the book.
Yeah, thank you.